Dear friends, today we will discuss about constructivism in higher education. Let us define or look into what is constructivism. The epistemology of constructivism proposes that human constructs knowledge by giving meaning to their current experiences based on their previous experiences, knowledge, mental images and beliefs. Phenomenon that and things external to an individual doesn't carry any meaning or knowledge in itself. Meanings and understanding of an external phenomenon or things are generated within oneself through a mental process. Thus, the source of every reaction to the external world is one's own mind. This notion challenges the idea of common reality and proposes that reality is that which we perceive. Constructivist thinkers like Jonassen proposes an instrumental role to mind in interpreting experiences in the real world that helps to produce a knowledge base that is idiosyncratic. Jonassen talks about constructivism as follows. Constructivism founded on Kantian beliefs, Immanuel Kant, Kantian beliefs claims that reality is constructed by the knower based upon mental activity. Humans are perceivers and interpreters who construct their own reality through engaging in those mental activities. Thinking is grounded in perception of physical and social experiences which can only be comprehended by the mind. What the mind produces are mental models that can be explained to the knower what he or she has perceived. We all conceive of the external reality somewhat differently based on our unique set of experiences with the world and our beliefs about them. Jerome S. Bruner, a famous constructivist, claims that constructivism began with Immanuel Kant, who, in his critique of pure reason, argued that the human mind is an originator of experience rather than a passive recipient of perception. Kant believed that the external physical world is known only through individual sensations. Constructivism values the subjective experiences of the child in all educational efforts. It considers active role of the subjective experience of the student in knowledge, morality and personality. It was Piaget, a famous constructivist, who proposed that children self-construct their personality and morality. The research conducted by Piaget provided robust evidences for this self-construction which are not taught to them in any way. His researches are example for that. The acceptance of this perspective has resulted in the origin and proliferation of educational constructivism. Let us look more into what is educational constructivism. Applied to the field of education, constructivism posed formidable challenge to traditional theories of learning, especially behaviorism. Traditional theories of learning have defined learning as acquisition of knowledge. The role of the student is thus limited to a receptacle in traditional learning theories, where learner receives whatever is offered by the teachers and other sources of knowledge. This notion is subject to severe criticism on account of limiting the role of learner as a meek receptor in the process of learning. In the wake of the advancement of constructivist philosophy, a totally new perspective on learning loomed up. Constructivism redefined learning as a process of constructing knowledge by the learner. Learning as construction of knowledge by the learner radically changed the role of the learner in the process of learning. This not only changes the role of the learner, instead demands a totally fresh outlook on the way we perceive education. Jean Piaget, Brunner, Lev Vygotsky are the most influential proponents of educational constructivism. The essence of the scholarly writings of Piaget theorized that children use different mental structures to think about and make sense of the world. As Piaget gives emphasis to the biological readiness and life experiences of the student and the children as the determinants of the structures available to children. Brunner, Jerome S. Brunner, again another constructivist, in his famous work The Process of Education, went beyond Piaget and argued that biological structure shall not be only the determinant of individuals' ability to derive meaning, interpretations, and thereby construction of new knowledge. Brunner proposed that anything can be taught to any children in an intellectually honestful manner. Vygotsky emphasized the role of society and culture as key determinant in the process of knowledge production. The social system in which the learner is involved has detrimental role in interpretation, derivation of meaning. The social system in which the learner is involved has detrimental role in interpretation and derivation of meaning by a learner. The gist of discussions above is that construction of knowledge is a process that happens through an active mental process of the constructor of knowledge. If this process to be happened, it needs certain conditions to be satisfied. They are, first of all, a problematic situation that demand or challenge the students to resolve a particular problem. And second, we can see that support from the surroundings to address the problem and resolve it. Third, the support thus extended should motivate the students to perceive the problem. Perception of the problem happens only when students can relate their personal experiences with the problem under consideration. Fourth, once the problem is perceived, the learner has to make a plan for responding to or resolving it. Fifth, since the way problems perceived will differ with each student, there is ample scope for differential responses and resolutions to the problem faced. This process necessitates readiness for respecting the divergent answers that derive from the students. Sixth, as the learners advance in their ability to process the experience, the knowledge construction will become more complex and advanced as they compress the meaning of things or phenomenon or experiences with the symbolic system of words and language. With this discussion, let us look into how a learner is being perceived in constructivist theory. Constructivism views every learner as a unique individual. Every individual has a unique way of approaching the stimulus in the environment depending upon their intellectual, emotional, social, cultural and several other influences that affects them. Interplay of these factors which I have mentioned earlier makes every learner a complex and multi-dimensional entity. The complexity and multidimensionality of the learner influences the way they approach and process the content or the task available for learning. If these influences are undermined, the learning will remain as a transitory phenomenon. Constructivism not only acknowledges the complexity and multidimensionality of the learner, but also use it as a source to be used for effective learning. Culture and its influence on the learner is another important aspect to be highlighted about constructivist viewpoint on learner. Every individual is the product of their culture. Culture influences the way they perceive and act upon something. Classrooms are treated as assemblages of culture brought in by the students. Opportunity for interpreting the content or task under consideration for learning through the cultural lens of the students have enormous benefits for the learner. This is also beneficial in a social context of learning in which the students get opportunity to understand the perspectives of students belonging to different cultural background. Interaction with students from other cultural backgrounds broaden the learner's understanding on specific learning tasks and content. Constructivism assigns considerable part of the responsibility of learning to the learner. This is what is being strongly argued by many of the constructivist thinkers. This is a major shift brought in by the constructivist philosophy, which drastically changed the role of the learner in learning process. Von Glaserfeld emphasized that learners construct their own understanding and that they do not simply mirror and reflect what they read. This is not only ensured active role of learner in the learning process, instead converted the role of teacher as a facilitator who extend all possible support to learning. Motivation for learner is another important factor that distinguishes constructivist notion of learner from other similar movements in education. Sustained motivation is essential for the construction of knowledge in the learning process. Sustained motivation mainly depends upon the thrill, enjoyment derived in the process of learning and the satisfaction derived through its output. These feelings of competence and belief in potential to solve new problems are derived from first-hand experience of mastery of problems in the past and are much more powerful than any external acknowledgement and motivation. Teacher and learning environment has a significant role in the maintenance of a sustained motivation in learning. Now, let us look into how a teacher is being perceived or being conceived in the idea of constructivism. Constructivist teacher is not a hard taskmaster who considers students as receptacles to be filled with knowledge. Learner, as a constructor of knowledge, redefine the role of teacher as a facilitator for learning. A facilitator set up a learning environment that motivate and challenge the learner to plunge into the process. Hence, one of the most important role of the teacher is to problematize the knowledge and use them as materials to be resolved by the students. Problematization of knowledge needs apt understanding of the age and abilities, interests, cultural and social backgrounds and any other factors that influence learning of the learner in the classroom. Since the students are treated as unique individuals in constructivism, the teacher has to fit problems matching to the tastes of each student. Challenging the students to resolve the educational problem is the first step of the teacher in constructivist learning environment. Close monitoring is another important responsibility of the constructivist teacher. The purpose of monitoring is to ensure the productive student engagement in the process of learning. It helps the teacher to understand the areas where support is needed by the students. The students may venture into tasks with their initial interest and minimum understanding about problems under consideration. Resultant blocks during the learning process may impede the progress of learner in the process of learning. Hence, monitoring is very crucial to understand the need for support for the students. Identifying the need for support and extending it whenever is needed is detrimental in maintaining the learner's motivation and enthusiasm in the process of learning. The social constructivist theory views teacher also as an active learner and participant in the learning process. In this process of active learning, teacher revises meanings about particular topic, sometimes broaden their view points to and accommodate, sometimes broaden their viewpoints to accommodate the viewpoints of students. Hence, the cultural capital of teacher is a significant contributor in the constructivist learning process. Learners compare their version of the truth with that of the instructor and fellow learners to get a new socially tested version of truth. The students may give a high value for the teacher's opinions and interferences in the learning process. This makes the role of the teacher more complicated. Teacher has to ensure that the students do not model their learning outcome simulating the teacher. Utmost care may be given to ensure that the students construct knowledge of their own, but at the same time without influence of teachers' interferences and opinions during the process of learning. This makes the task of a teacher more complicated and complex to deliver than the role of teacher in a traditional classrooms. Teachers in constructivist classrooms are not expecting the students to construct knowledge in line with the already developed knowledge. After all, it is quite impossible to think that someone has to develop the same knowledge which is available in the syllabus. Instead, constructivism proposes that students should be motivated to think about the existing facts, concepts and any form of knowledge. In a constructivist perspective, opportunity to ponder over the existing knowledge and to emerge new knowledge out of it. When constructivists talk about constructing knowledge, they are referring both to the content of knowledge and to the structure of knowledge. Constructivists take the view that it is through active reasoning that both content and structure are constructed simultaneously. Let us look into the implications of constructivism in curriculum construction with special reference to higher education level. The constructivist theory has strongly influenced the education practices of the modern society. Setting up education according to the constructivist practices demands serious restructuring in the curricular practices. The major viewpoints that influence the curriculum construction at higher education level are described here. Curriculums draws insights from constructivism needs to envision the expected conditions and support needed for its implementation. Proper planning of a supportive atmosphere is hence a key factor for the success of a constructivist curriculum. The support includes a learning environment that facilitates students to address the specific learning task, proper interventions during the process of curriculum transaction and a proper evaluation system. First factor, the supportive atmosphere, depends upon the specific task or content to be taught. Since this may vary from content to content and task to task, a variable setup to facilitate the process of learning is very essential. Also, there should be considerable space for variability in setting up learning environment depending upon specific backgrounds of the students. Second, the interventions to be done during curriculum transactions shall be in the form of physical, intellectual and emotional support. These interventions include helping students to access physical objects, support in all physical activities involved in learning, diagnosing and accommodating learning style differences, augmenting the skills that control a student's information processing system, and offering challenges support to students as a more knowledgeable other. Curriculum planning under constructivist theory give high emphasis to how a content is to be taught than what to be taught. This necessitates constructivist curriculum to explicitly state the ways of teaching with sufficient leeway to accommodate the contextual differences. According to Resnick, learning occurs most effectively in context, and that context becomes an important part of knowledge associated with learning. Contextual support involves teachers' role as facilitators of learning and mentors who lent their hand in the form of cognitive apprenticeship and availability of multiple opportunity for the learner to express what they know in various kinds of activities. This has been endorsed by a number of constructivists like Newman, Marx and Cameron. Curriculum transaction as a collaborative effort is another implication of constructivism in curriculum transaction. Cultural background of students brings in varieties of perceptions in any learning environments. This makes constructivist curriculum a shelf of support system to nurture the varied perspectives of learners. The curricular activities in constructivist curriculum is a collaborative endeavor that is made up of learners' perspectives. It is not only that every learner is free to express their perspectives, but they are introduced to new perspectives, their fellow learners, which eventually modify and broaden one's own basic assumptions about the curricular content exposed to them. The collaborative effect upon learners has been well endorsed by researchers like Slavian, who observe that considerable evidence exists that students learn better in cooperative groups than they do individually. Thus, engaging students in cooperative, collaborative and reciprocal teaching are quintessential characteristic of constructivist curriculum. The assessment and evaluation strategies of constructivist curriculum is not separated from teaching and learning. Assessment is integrated into teaching and learning. As the perceptual differences are the strength and backbone of constructivism, promotion of homogenized answers are not entertained in the constructivist assessment. All responses of students are treated as valid perceptions to be addressed. Constructivist strategies don't go with high stakes standardized testing system followed by the modern educational practices. Every response to an issue or content is the way student views his world, and hence it should be respected. This makes assessment practice a learning support system in which teacher can give a task to the learner and observe how much and what kind of help they need in order to complete the task successfully. Let us look how constructivism will be in a classroom. We have already seen that constructivism promotes learning through the construction of ideas through constructive ways with the facilitation of teachers. While planning for constructivist classroom, it is important to give opportunity for the students to solve problems presented by the teacher. Hence, the lesson plan, worksheet, educational assignments, both inside and outside the classrooms, and any other curricular activities need sufficient scope for the active involvement of the students. Constructivist classrooms never promote acceptance of facts, concepts and ideas unless they are verified individually as well as in groups by the learner. Classroom experiences should reflect and promote different perspectives of the same facts, concepts and ideas presented in the classroom. Keeping a daily journal by student is a practice entertained by many constructivist educationalists. This helps the students to take note of their observations and experience and help them to form their own opinions and theories about the facts, concepts, ideas presented in the classroom. Opportunity to verify and compare the journals with other students would help them to understand and appreciate, even modify the perspectives maintained by them. Constructivist classrooms promote asking questions by the students and answering them with the support of others. Teachers have important role in promoting questions and helping them to answer it collaboratively. Students presenting their perspectives and opinions on educational content which has been critically and reflectively received by the students also is popular strategy in constructivism. Allowing students to work in pairs or groups and presenting the idea in the whole class, which is followed by discussion among all students is another important strategy followed in constructivist classroom. As a whole, any activity that promote an independent intellectual identity among students is the key purpose of all constructivist classrooms. Intellectual identity helps the students to develop their own theories and opinions about any academic content and even life events exposed to them. Opportunity for critical thinking, analytical capacity and inquiry are crucial to develop intellectual identity among students. Open-ended questions, puzzling and challenging situations are very much helpful for the students to develop intellectual identity. Constant conversation between student and teacher and among students is another important condition that promote intellectual identity. Conversations help the students to formulate, revise and reformulate their hypotheses and theories about various academic questions they come across. According to Tam, a famous constructivist, there are certain basic characteristics of constructivist learning environments. They are: 1. Sharing of knowledge between teachers and students. 2nd, sharing of authority of classroom activities between teachers and students. 3rd, teacher as facilitator and a guide. 4th, formation of small learning groups still highly heterogeneous in its nature. The above characteristics constitute the basic essence of constructivism. In addition to the context in which the learning process is going on, also have a great role in determining the nature and direction of a constructivist classroom. Now let us conclude the whole discussion. Learner as the producer of knowledge is a radical idea put forwarded by constructivist theory. The impact of this philosophy has drastically changed our traditional learning environment, a role of the teacher and students, and the organization of curriculum and curricular activities. The most important challenge for us is developing a new genre of teachers who can understand the importance of constructivism in our curricular activities. Proper application of constructivism in education can bring in miraculous changes in our classrooms. Dear friends, hope the discussion was useful. See you soon. Thank you.